St George's Day 1968. 4 great English Fusilier regiments are positioned far and wide across the globe. It was on this day they would be joined together as one of the first large infantry regiments of the British Army. The day they would become the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. Marked by St George's Day celebrations in Lincolnshire and Hong Kong, a symbolic changing of the guard ceremony in Somerset, and a full trooping of the colours in the blistering heat of the Persian Gulf. This bittersweet day signalled the inheritance of 4 exceptional military histories by a brand new regiment, tasked with remembering their individual traditions, whilst looking to the future as one proud and loyal family of Fusiliers.
The Fusiliers, all 3 battalions, will have served in the Cold War at various times within one British Corps as part of British Army of the Rhine. Different roles depending on what they were doing, but all having that role of deterrence and then defence if ever the Soviets came across the border. I remember we also used to have short notice deployment exercises, so you'd have to have your kit packed all the time in case something happened. And every now and then someone would ring up and say, right, you've got 24 hours or 12 hours or 2 hours, whatever it may be, to go for it and form up the battalion and do whatever you had to do. So you were constantly sort of at notice to move, to go and do stuff. And then it all finished. The war came down in 1989, and that was the end of the Cold War and on to pastures new.
Today, the regiment continues to play an integral role in the British Army and consists of 2 battalions. 1st Fusiliers, the regulars based in Tidworth, and 5th Fusiliers, reservists from across England, between them representing all of England's Fusiliers, from London, the Midlands, Lancashire, Warwickshire, Newcastle and Northumberland.
Fusiliers have had a huge involvement in Northern Ireland right the way through the Troubles from the moment it started. So a huge, long, distinguished association with that province, and also in some pretty well-defined and difficult operations. The Fusiliers have been absolutely intimately involved in the entirety of the Northern Ireland campaign, and I have to say, have not only distinguished themselves, but also have paid a huge price in terms of casualties. And I think people understandably focus on some of the recent campaigns of Afghanistan and Iraq in particular. But if you look back at, particularly in the early days of Northern Ireland, some of the fighting that went on in places like Londonderry and in the west of Belfast, it was significant, and we paid the price.
As armoured infantry, the Fusiliers are highly skilled soldiers who need an incredibly varied range of skills and expertise to be able to act as an effective team. From infantry soldiers to warrior gunners, snipers and qualified adventurers, there's a formidable amount of experience across the team, who are also equipped with the Warrior Armoured Fighting Vehicle.
So the history of the Fusiliers in Cyprus really starts when the Troubles started, when the Turks invaded, and the 3rd Battalion was the spearhead battalion and was sent out to try and sort out or help protect the sovereign's base areas, providing a buffer between the Turks and the Greeks and ensuring that the UK dependents could be extracted from the island safely. The regiment's had a long association with Cyprus since it was formed, really, or very shortly after it was formed, and quite a lot of adventures out there. So it was an important job, still is to this day. I mean, there's no sign of a peace settlement, I don't think. So it will probably carry on for some time to come.
Almost since formation, the Colonel-in-Chief of the regiment has been His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, appointed in 1969 by Her Majesty the Queen. Colonel of the regiment, Major General Paul Nansen, has been in position since 2015.
I remember sitting in the mess one day and someone came in and said, Saddam Hussein has invaded Kuwait. I remember us being told that we were deploying finally, company commander getting us all together and saying, this is it boys, we're off to go and liberate Kuwait. I remember lots of specific events. I imagine the big one that everyone will remember about that very brief war. It went on for 100 hours, 3 days effectively. But of course we had the horrific event on the 26th when we lost 2 armoured vehicles from C Company, were hit by friendly fire by an American aircraft. You go through the preparing yourself mentally for what might happen, but until it actually happens, you don't really contemplate it. The commanding officer talking to us later on that night about what had happened and what we had to do, and he was basically telling us we had to get back into the fight. And he said, I remember him saying very clearly, the brigade commander had called him up and said, because you've lost the best part of a platoon, the company's been hit hard, battle casualty replacements aren't quite here yet. If you want to sit this one out, you can. And I remember him looking at it and saying, just can't do that, can we? You've got to, wouldn't be right, wouldn't be the thing to do. So he went back in that night. And I think that's our fighting spirit, Fusilier spirit, whatever you want to call it. I'd like to think any battalion in the British Army would do the same, but Fusiliers definitely would.
The last 50 years has seen both regular and reservist Fusiliers deployed in action across the world, at the forefront of difficult and diverse situations.
Balkans in the 90s was a United Nations force to again try and bring some stability to that to Bosnia in the first place, and effectively try to keep the peace. Halfway through that tour, the mission changed and the battalion went under NATO command and started to enforce the peace and started to try and broker a longer peace, force the Serbs in particular to come to the table and start to allow people to go back to their homes. And that's what we did, was we made sure that we got their people back to their homes. Quite rewarding actually, watching people who'd been driven out by war coming back in, and then they were coming back to a bit of a mess, but at least they were coming back and we were able to get some normality back in terms of power, medical, that sort of thing. But hugely rewarding and very exciting time.
As modern British soldiers, the battalions have found themselves serving across the world, in many varied and sometimes hostile environments. To be best prepared for these postings, adventurous training qualifications and the pursuit of team sports to keep soldiers in peak condition have always been important parts of the regiment's skill set.
This time slightly different. This wasn't about liberating Kuwait. This is about going into Iraq. After 9/11 and part of a mainly US force, we moved into Kuwait, moved straight out into the desert, and a bit like last time, just did lots of training, getting ourselves ready, living out of our vehicles, going on the ranges and getting ourselves up to speed with what we had to do. Unlike when we went last time, this time we were watching what was going on in the world because we could watch television. In our concentration area there was Sky News, we had mobile phones. This time we could see what was going on, so the build up to war we could all see. So the mission for us, Fusilier Battle Group, was to be the first battle group across the border, secure breaches through the minefield, across a ditch, and then get up to take over from the Americans on the outskirts of a city called Basra, and then wait for the conditions to be right before we went into Basra. And we attacked on the 6th of April into the north of the city was the Fusiliers' objective. So for the first couple of weeks it was really difficult soldiering, trying to establish some sort of law and order. And again, Fusiliers did what Fusiliers had to do, and they adapted and they overcame and they dealt with the situation, and we did it by and large pretty well. But it was learning on the job. We hadn't been prepared for that, and so I was very proud of them.
In 2006, after the initial deployment of 3rd Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, the government realised that there was a requirement to uplift the number of soldiers in Helmand in order to counter the insurgency there. There's about 120 of us. We did some integration training to make sure that we were up to speed with some of the tactics and techniques that we needed for deploying and operating in that environment. And then within a couple of weeks we found ourselves forward-based into a platoon outpost known as Nowzad. We were there for just over 3 months, which was a fascinating, interesting but pretty challenging time. We were under contact every day pretty much, sometimes multiple times a day, trying to ensure that the Taliban wasn't able to gain control of what's known as the district centre. The government of Afghanistan wished to secure a number of the important towns within Helmand province, and that's what it was. It was a fight really for 3 months to make sure that the Taliban couldn't control it. I think one of the great things about the Fusiliers is that we recruit from the 4 traditional Fusilier areas of England. And so we're used to very much working together as a family, but we coalesce around the fact that we're all Fusiliers. So I think we're used to working with different personalities, and that was a real strength when we got to Helmond. For myself as the company commander, for my platoon commanders and my section commanders, I think they would probably argue it was the most challenging thing they've done in the army. Well, once you've been in that environment as Fusiliers together, then really you never forget those experiences and you never forget the people.
Our role is to close with the enemy, probably more so than any other organisation in the British Army. So our fight is, I would say, the hardest fight, because we have to get up close and personal with the opposition. So I do think an infantryman's spirit is different to anyone else in the army. I would say that, wouldn't I, because I'm an infantryman. But we're trained that way. That's how we operate, and that's the Fusilier spirit as well. Yeah, that's what we do. It's about the spectrum of tasks that we've done over the last 50 years. If you look at the left end of the spectrum, high intensity warfighting, down to peace support operations, humanitarian operations, in Northern Ireland counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency. That variety has marked out the 50 years of the regiment's existence. It's quite a spread, and it compares very favourably with what antecedent regiments did. The Fusiliers have managed to turn their hand to whatever we've pointed them at, and they do it very well.
Whilst the regiment is proud of its achievements from the last 50 years, it also continues to pay tribute to more historical causes for remembrance. 5 traditional days are celebrated. The regimental colours, rallying point flags carried into battle until the late 1800s, come out, with often grand ceremonies taking place to mark the occasions. Family and Fusilier Association members are invited to join as often as possible, because no regiment is complete without its invaluable support network. It is also in the simple, everyday actions and achievements that a Fusilier marks themselves out as being part of this proud and committed regiment. A regiment that takes pride in calling all its members family.
You just never know what's around the corner. You really don't know what's around the corner. The best thing you can do is be as well prepared as you possibly can. If you start from a position of strength, then we'll take whatever challenges thrown at us as we have done for the last 50 years.
The last 50 years stand as testament to the character of those who proudly wear the historical insignia of those former regiments. Because whatever the challenge, once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier.